So, me and Beverly, second conversation, and inadvertently, we stumbled into a wormhole of Shakespeare. I was saying that I really haven't still gotten the difference between poetry and prose, reading Shakespeare in English, which is not my native tongue, and really not getting it. And bam, there you have Beverly just sharing Shakespeare that she knows by heart. Quite amazing. So, Shakespeare, poetry, prose, language translations, Native American or native English speakers and non-native English speakers. That took us for a few meanders along this conversation. And then we got into talking about animals, pets, which led us on to grief and love. It's a meandering conversations. It's a meandering conversation, the way that these conversations are. And I hope you get something out from listening to us. And I'm recording. Everybody's recording. Hi.
Hi. I loved the file you put out. That was so much fun.
So what's that? It was so fun because I saw it and I was just, oh man, that is so cute. And then Caspian, he's the one who sort of did the little snippet. And I saw him when he was looking at it and he was just laughing. So very, very good. I like it. It's very apt. And I've gotten some feedback from a couple of listeners who said, I wrote in the introduction that I hope that it kind of feels as if you're a part of the conversation, or at least you're listening in on it, a fly on the wall type of thing. And I got feedback from a friend of mine who said that's just what it felt like. So I thought that was nice.
Yeah, that's lovely.
Yeah. So now we'll see what happens. But I have learned a lot, because this is like a different form podcast than what I have done before. And the other podcast I've done, I've never really done anything with, so I'm learning heaps from just making snippets, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, what can I do with those? You can do little video snippets, yes, but, there's also stuff I can pull quotes or, spin off on a blog post in like a gazillion places.
Yeah, there's something to a conversational record. I'm still learning all of that too. The tech hurdle has been particularly steep for me. I'm quick to muck about for a few minutes in a new piece of software, but actually getting it to dance in the direction I wanted is a little bit more difficult.
I don't know if it's smart or if it's dumb, but I have Caspian to help me with that stuff because I just find it boring. So I've just gone help, and he helps, because it's like I don't enjoy that. I used to. When my firstborn was born in 1999, I set up a blog, which was like kind of pre-blog day. So it was a website that I, HTML coded and stuff like that. And I kind of like that. But since then, it's like, nah, somebody else can do that. I can do more fun stuff.
Yeah, coming from the digital photography world, where the photographer if you're serious about your images, the photographer has to do the processing. So that I kind of view my recordings and podcasts the same way. I think I have an obligation to the work to see it through, which means it takes probably a hell of a lot longer than...
Yeah, it's like I was thinking about that because there was a question. I'm in a group on Facebook for authors. It's a Swedish group. And somebody was asking, I'm Swedish and I've published my book in both Swedish and in English. And I'm doing the audio recording of the one in Swedish. Can I do it in the one in English? Or... will people get upset because my English isn't perfect? And, asking the question. And I was like, well, my English is good. Yes. And I've recorded my own audiobook. But it was interesting to see how many people said, oh, no, I don't want the author to read their own stuff. It's never good. Unless they're really good at reading their own stuff. And I was going, I don't know that my stuff, which might be because it's so personal in a sense, I don't know that it would work for somebody else to read my book.
I think it's very different. I mean, because HAQ is about authors in their own voice, it's like, oh, heck yeah, I want the author to read it. Because I think that has...
And HAQ is here's a quarter.
Here's a quarter, yeah. It's, I think even if the author isn't your perfect narrator, I think the author reads things with an intimacy that you can't get from somebody else. I think it's a very, very special relationship that authors have with their own work. And I kind of like hearing the different nuances and accents in people's voices when they are not English speakers from Britain or the US. I think it leaves a special imprint that tells you that this author has seen and known things that I don't know.
And it's interesting with voices and accents. I have been like, it's like, oh, I can't listen to this podcast because the person is trying to speak English and doing a bad job of it. But then I got a different take on it. There was somebody in Forward Link, the Akimbo Workshop Discourse, who posted a blog post about non-native English speakers writing in English, and saying precisely what you just said. It's like, I love that. I love that people are trying to communicate with me in my language, in a language that's not theirs. So don't ever apologize if, you get the idioms mixed up or, the grammar isn't perfect or anything. It's like, I love that. And reading that gave me a new take on listening to sort of non-native English speakers going, so it's like it added my appreciation for the effort in a sense.
I think there's a really interesting thing that happens when language is translated. I just got the download, so I haven't opened it yet. One of my favorite authors of narrative work is Jhumpa Lahiri. She wrote The Emperor of All Maladies a while ago. She is of Indian descent, but her latest book was written in Italian and translated into English. And I'm just fascinated with the idea that this work may have gone through several duplications and transitions.
So she wrote it. So she's fluent in Italian too.
I'm assuming because she, which I think is amazing. I've been taking Italian lessons on a little application for 2 years almost, and I can say there's a spider in my boot.
How does that sound?
C'è un ragno nella... Oh, I've forgotten the word for boot. That was one of the first sentences. It would be nella scarpa if it was in my shoe. C'è un ragno nella scarpa.
So, yeah, it's so interesting. In the Creative Community Book Club, we've read a couple of pieces. One Winner Brenner, I think his name is, or Brenner or something, who did some Chinese translations. That is, he translated old Chinese poetry into English.
Yeah, the Tao Te Ching.
And then we read the Tao Te Ching, which he had also translated. We read something else before, but then we read the Tao Te Ching, and we read Rilke's The Letters to a Young Poet. Yeah, but so the translations, it's like I've gotten a new appreciation for translations because we have been talking about translations, and you know, it's like when we have like 4 or 5 different translations of the same book, and you read something, you go, that's not at all what mine says. It's like just open up that Pandora's box in a sense. But so I was reading. What did we talk about this last time? No, I don't think we did. The Tales of Utari by Leon Hearn, which is a pseudonym, I think. Science fantasy series, 4 books.
I've heard the title, but I've never looked at it.
They're gorgeous. They're gorgeous books. I reread them. I think I've read them twice before, actually. So I reread them, and I had them in Swedish. And then I read one of them in English. And I so appreciated the Swedish translators, 2 translators, one for the one book and another one for 2 of the others. So skilled. It's like, you know, it's like if I was reading it in Swedish or English, it didn't really matter because I got sort of the full width and breadth of what I experience as this is how the author expresses herself. So it just makes me like in awe at translators. You know, it's like, man, that's a tricky job, especially poetry or like, you know, very carefully crafted writings. It's like, geez, that's tricky job.
Yeah, it makes me kind of wish when I was in college, I took one of those survey courses, you know, they call it the Great Books, where you read a whole bunch of books across Western history. And one of the volumes we read was Dante's Inferno. We probably read the whole Divine Comedy, which I thought at the time, this is not divine and it's not funny. But I didn't appreciate at the time, you know, I was 18 years old, that this book was written in medieval Italian, and I was reading it in contemporary English, and there was probably something shifted in that translation, and it didn't have the frame to look at it that way. I may have appreciated it differently.
Yeah, and I want it's like, that's one of those things that I just feel that I don't know that a person really can they probably can, but it's much harder to come to appreciate that aspect of a thing unless somebody kind of points you in the direction or nudges you a little bit, or at least just, oh, and here's an old translation of the thing. Check it out, see how you like that one. Going, oh, I don't understand that. Because that's one of the things I have a hard time with. That's, Shakespeare. Reading original Shakespeare in English. My English is good, but it's not that good. But then again, I'm not that good at reading poetry and sonnets and stuff either. So it's like, I can read the words, but they kind of stop there. It's like, I don't see the thread. I don't see the connections. I don't get images in my mind that would help me sort of get, it doesn't speak to me. It's like kind of sterile in a sense.
Yeah, so now you've wandered into one of my back gardens.
Okay.
I adore Shakespeare. I took a Shakespeare class in college. I have several complete volumes that are, slightly different in their composition. I think one of the things with Shakespeare is that because he wrote plays, it's meant for interpretation. And there's a lot of English and European history in that. He used basically the news of his day in his writing. So having a little bit of that background that my Shakespeare professor gave us was really helpful in finding a context. So you get to things like Macbeth and Richard III, and they're historical events that he places people that you can walk around and see. And some of the soliloquies are just beautifully evocative. The tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow.
Don't know. I probably should know. Don't know.
This is a scene in Macbeth when someone comes to they're basically in a castle preparing for battle, and someone comes to him and says, "The queen, my lord, has died." And he looks at the person and said, "She should have died hereafter. There would have been time for such a word." And the word he means is sorrow, although it's not said. And then he goes into tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, creeps in its petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, out, brave candle. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player who struts and frets his hour upon the stage and is heard no more. 'Tis a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. And so that's obviously my interpretation of that passage. But when you lay someone's interpretation of, I'm the king, they've just told me my queen has died, and I feel like everything is just futile, and this is what I say.
So what What is it about Shakespeare that you adore? What is the hook?
He has a way with language. I mean, some of it's overwrought. Romeo and Juliet is like, whoa, the teenage love.
Yeah, well, everybody's been there.
Yeah. But some of it is so subtle and so funny. There's a line out of a play called Troilus and Cressida, which is like one of the ones nobody pays much attention to, where there's a one, I don't remember which character, I think it might be Ajax, hiding, or Achilles. No, Achilles is the speaker. So Achilles is like, and all men were of my mind. And the guy hiding behind the rock says, wit would be out of fashion, which is hilarious. He has all these little asides, so he played to two audiences. One, the people down in the pit who were the normal everyday people, and then the people up in the stands who were like the royalty, the non-commoners. And so most of his plays had these two levels, so you could get a raucous laugh out of it, and then he would express these ideas of, in Hamlet, what is the worth of a life? What does this matter? And so he has his own soliloquy, and then there's several places in there, what a piece of work is man, how noble in reason. Then it comes down to the end of that, and what is it to me, this quintessence of dust? It's like, yeah, there's all this great stuff, and what do I care? So he elaborates on so many parts of the human condition with such depth and understanding, especially for his time. It's hard to take that out of context.
I think context is highly underrated in general. It's easy to just get things wrong or not get them because you don't know the context or you don't understand the context. But so have you like deliberately, now I'm going to learn this by heart, or it's just come because you've read it 555 times, or?
Most of it's because I've read it over and over and over. I can't tell you how many times I've read Hamlet and Richard III and Macbeth. I've read Twelfth Night a couple times. I just liked the language. And I've read through a number of the sonnets. There was a big treat last year. Sir Patrick Stewart every day would record one of the sonnets and put it on Facebook. It was so cool. I never did hear him read the one, my favorite is Let Me Not to the Marriage of True Minds Admit Impediments. That one. I think it's 116.
So is there anything else do you have another backyard? Shakespeare is in one. Do you have another one?
Oh. Probably. I read cookbooks. The plot's terrible, but the index is amazing. I go on these memoir kicks, so I've read a number of memoirs of chefs and food writers. I find it really interesting, their relationship with the food industry. I mean, there's one. Oh my goodness. When you hear Kitchen Confidential in Anthony Bourdain's voice.
Yeah. I've read that one. I haven't heard it, but I've read it.
He has a great voice. Of course, he did TV. So he's used to because he's talking about his own memories. You know, I think memoir in particular is special in the author's own voice.
I've also always loved memoirs. And I think it's something that I've read, you know, ever since I was a teenager. I've read. I remember, I think I probably was a teenager when I read Vincent, what's his name? Something Stone. A Vincent van Gogh memoir or biography or whatever. Yeah, it's a biography, but it's a gorgeous book. It is so, and you know, it's like, again, books can, not necessarily do, but can just open up a whole new world, you know, because all of a sudden my relationship with Van Gogh totally shifted because I'd read this book about his life and kind of, you know, again, there's an appreciation that comes when some, you know, when it opens, I can see something and I can understand stuff that aren't obvious, you know, to the eye unless it opens up.
Which is really interesting with Van Gogh because his work is open to the eye.
Yeah.
Have you been to the museum?
In Amsterdam?
Yeah. I was there in 2007, going up to the gallery on the second floor and looking at those paintings. Unreal. You can literally see the movement of his hand because you can see the texture of the oil painting. There was one. It was a picture of roots on the side of it. And it struck me as... I think a lot of people would consider it fairly unremarkable as a painting. But the image, the movement in it struck me as so emotional. I mean, I stood there in tears. It felt to me like he was expressing the inner struggles that he was having.
Mm. Yeah, I think I was there a couple of years before you. I think I was there a couple of years before you. I was taking a course in Amsterdam with work, and so I was like, oh, I need to go there.
It's a wonderful city.
Yeah, it is. I was there with my youngest a couple of years ago to 2019. And then we went to, I think it's like fairly new as a museum. I don't really know, but I think so. Rembrandt's house.
I don't remember that.
No, I think it is. So, which is interesting because Rembrandt kind of went into bankruptcy. So he had to leave his house and leave everything. So, you know, there's records because then somebody was coming in to, you know, this is a bankruptcy. We need to make a note of all of the cupboards and chairs and tables and you know, how many knives and buckets and, you know, everything. They wrote down everything that was in Rembrandt's house.
They had an inventory.
So there's that inventory. So I don't know. I think this house was like, I'm probably butchering the story, but but I think it was like, it wasn't, a lot wasn't done to it. And then it was on the verge of like, falling apart when the city was like, well, we really should do something. And they found that inventory. And so they've been able to, if not get his stuff back, get corresponding stuff back. And, it was inventory per room. The person making the inventory would go into the kitchen looking around saying, what do I see? So they have, it's a thin house, it's thin. It's a thin house, deep, but thin. And then they built on an additional, so you walk in at the basement and you kind of move up. And then at the top, which was his, the studio where he also had his pupils coming to study with him. Then you walk into the new house and they have like gallery. So it's like 3 or 4 floors of gallery stuff with his stuff. And it's one of those perfect little museums, because you could probably spend a couple of hours in there for sure, but it's not as the Rijksmuseum, which is so huge that, I could spend a year in here and not really see everything. So he's like, I really, really recommend, if you ever come to Amsterdam again, I really recommend Rembrandt's house, because it was just...
This is Felix.
This is I had a cat named Felix, but he wasn't black. Aww.
Yeah, he's a sweetie. Aren't ya? Hi, Poo Poo. He's my cuddle buddy. Well, the dog who's sitting behind me in my chair. And, yeah, those tall, narrow houses. The Anne Frank house is the same way. And one thing I loved about Amsterdam was how walkable it was.
Yeah, the inner city. It's my favorite, like, small, big town, because it is walkable. In between the channels, it's a gorgeous little city.
I was there in September, so the Bloemenmarkt was full of flowers. It was so beautiful. The idea of a floating market was so, it's intriguing to me. I live in a river city, but we would never put anything on the Ohio. It's like,
So what made you go to Amsterdam?
I was doing a professional conference in Noordwijk-on-Zee, near Leiden. Mm-hmm. And so I flew that trip was so funny. I flew into Amsterdam, and they lost my luggage coming in. So here I am, and I don't speak a word of Dutch. Zip. And my luggage is lost. I have one tiny overnight bag. And they've actually paged me over the intercom in Schiphol. It's this huge airport. And I'm like, who the heck knows me? And they tell me, your bag's late. We'll be transferring it for you. But I knew that I needed to get some stuff. And Schiphol has this amazing market there. They've got clothing stores and drugstores. So imagine this English-speaking little person from West Virginia looking for toothpaste in a Dutch pharmacy, just praying you got the right brand of stuff. And so I bought some toothpaste. I bought an outfit, a pair of black pants, a black T-shirt, and even under things because my bag was lost. I didn't know when I would find it. And then I found my way to the rail station. I took the train to Leiden, just a little short, I think I took a city bus to Noordwijk, which is a gorgeous little town on the North Sea. I mean, it was beautiful. And because it was very warm that year in September. And I remember going out onto the beach and seeing couples so relaxed with their little child. And the little child would wander around and go up to other couples. And in the U.S., the parents are likely to be lovely. The parents are likely to be really nervous about that. Your kids don't talk to strangers. In Noordwijk, everybody was just like, oh, cute baby. Yeah, hi, baby. And, the kid just goes on. The parents are kind of looking up occasionally. The sense of relaxed community was so nice. So, and then after spending several days in Noordwijk, getting my bags back, I went back to Amsterdam and spent, I think, 2 nights and 3 days touring around the city. And it was just such a lovely experience for a city. It was very relaxed. I never felt like I had to watch over my shoulder. I never felt nervous or I walked everywhere. I took the canal boats. I found a little bread and cheese shop near me, and I would get bread and some cheese and have that for lunch. And I'm all about the bread and cheese. I could do that for lunch.
Me too. Yeah, any day.
It was, and I remember going into it's Amsterdam. They have tourist shops, of course, that sold little pieces of pottery and stuff. And I remember going in to buy gifts for family members into this one little shop. And the shopkeeper was a Middle Eastern gentleman who spoke like 5 languages. It was just amazing. In the U.S., you have to be somebody really, erudite in a university specializing to have that capability. And this gentleman was a business owner who just matter-of-factly, yeah, of course I'm going to speak these languages. My customers do. It was neat.
And I think that's one of the downsides to being a native English speaker, especially American. There are more British people who actually know German or French or something, but it is so easy to. So when here, people who come here who know English have an easier, if their English is good, they're less likely to learn Swedish than people who come here and they speak Tigrinya, which they speak in Somalia, or they speak Dari, which they speak in Afghanistan, or it's like, well, sorry, but you're gonna have to learn Swedish because nobody knows what you're saying otherwise. And I'm kind of one of those bad friends to English speakers because I always want to speak English. So I kind of, I take the opportunity whenever I can because I love English. So I don't let them practice their Swedish even though they should. Because I want to do English.
Yeah, I have had experience learning French from high school into college. I learned reading German in college, in graduate school, because we had a 2-language requirement, and a lot of people just punted and took computer language because that counted. It's like, I am not going to learn to talk to computers. I want a real language. So I learned enough German to be annoying. And then I got really interested in Italian, again, through food.
Makes sense. So have you retained your French and your German?
Avec le français, petit peu. German less so, because I took it as a reading language. I can recognize some phrases and some words. French, I had like 6 years of French.
Yeah, it's interesting with languages. I took French for 4 years, I think, in like high school, and the last year I had a teacher that I just couldn't stand. So I actually had to skip the last test in order not to flunk it so that my grades would drop. Which is like very much not me, if you kind of know who I am, or who I was at least, very much good girl, high achiever, good grades. But I let him rub me the wrong way, and I just couldn't kind of get past it because I was 16 and, I was a know-it-all for sure. So I just couldn't stand him. And then I took German for 3 years also. And I'd taken German 1 year when I went as a foreign exchange student to the US, which was fun because I took German there. And I was the star of the class because Swedish is a Germanic language. So a lot of the vocabulary, even though there's quite a big difference, if I'm here, there's quite a big difference between Swedish and German. But as being in the US, I could see how closely related those two languages were.
The accent,
Yeah, and a lot of the vocabulary is, there's a lot of words that are the same. Spoken a little bit differently, but basically written the same. So that was again, I got an insight into the relationship between Swedish and German because I was somewhere else looking at it, So yeah. The shifted in perspectives are really key. But my, it's like my French is, I don't get it. It's like, I don't remember. It's been too long, and I've never recovered from him, that teacher. I did some Duolingo in German because I was working a little bit with a German company a couple of years ago, and that kind of helped. So the German comes back quicker, in a sense, but French is hopeless in Duolingo because there's so many letters. There's so many weird letters, and you go, but you don't hear half of them. So I found it really tricky to do Duolingo in French because it's like, oh, how do I know how to spell this with the E-U-E-X? It's like, oh my God. So I just bailed.
Oh, so I've developed a trick with Duo. I use it for mostly spoken Italian. So instead of using the keyboard, I hit the little microphone thing on my iPhone and I speak it.
Even though they ask you to, when they're asking you to write it?
Yeah.
Clever.
Yeah. So, and by seeing it over and over, I've learned the spellings a little better and the accents. And one of the tricky things about Italian verbs is that in a few of them, the accent tells you, it gives it a different, it can be first person or third person depending on the accent. So that, it's spero or spero.
Which means?
Hope. So it's spero. Spero is I hoped. Spero is I hope. So it's just the tense. But I'm sure it makes a difference to somebody who actually knows the language. I know how to make amusing noises to a phone.
True. But yeah, it's interesting though to learn languages. Even though I've kind of stopped. I'm good at Swedish. I'm good at English. I kind of have stopped there. I haven't really gone that much further, but I can fake it quite successfully. I can, give me an Italian text and I can read it so it sounds as if I should know it. And same with French and Spanish and stuff. Hey, Felix.
Hey, Fida. He's moving a little slow today. He had a vet appointment yesterday and got his vaccinations, so he's kind of like...
Not all there. Yeah.
Yeah,
I know
just
the feeling.
But
Is he old? Is he old?
no, he's somewhere between 5 and 7. Kind of funny. My neighbor next door, she'd lived there for a number of years, and I knew she was interested in selling, but didn't realize that she had actually moved out while she was selling her home, and her 2 cats she was coming back every day to feed the 2 cats. So they weren't wandering around much, but they were living mostly outside through one winter, and then she asked me to help catch them. But she only wanted to take one of the cats to her new apartment and didn't want to take Felix. Well, by that time, he was young enough. Maggie was an older cat and was quite happy to go back indoors.
Indoors, yeah.
But Felix took a little bit longer to convince, and she decided that one cat was enough for her. And at the time, I had a very elderly cat who was kind of failing. And once my older kitty moved on, I took on very slowly acclimating Felix to I had been feeding him for about a year at the point where he finally decided he would come in the house some. And he would come in a little bit every day, and then finally he once it got cold that winter, he was happy to come in and spend the night, and then he was fully integrated. Yeah. He'll come and sit in my lap, and he cuddles up close, and he's very lovey. But I laugh about it because my larger dog, she's not older than my dogs are the same age, is a plot hound, which is a brindle Carolina hunting dog. She came to me because, again, I had lost an older hound who had passed away, and my little one, the little Jack Russell who sits behind me, was just devastated. I mean, we all miss Luke, but she was just a mess. So I was standing in the vet office one day and said, the little one is really sad. I need to find her a companion. So I know you sometimes hear of dogs needing homes. And the vet just whips out her phone. Goes, my friend has, who passed away recently, had 5 dogs, and we haven't yet placed this one. So the vet's friend had rescued her from an abusive situation and named her Olive. So she came into the house. It was not, they kept telling me she didn't have much of a personality. Not true.
I think it seldom is.
One way to make sure that dogs are entertained is you give them little treats. And she's a 65-pound dog, so she comes up to my hip. She's tall and skinny. I gave her a little chew thing that's about this big. And she takes this thing in her mouth and she's flinging it around the living room. Instead of, the little one, she just
swallows, inhales it. Yeah.
And here's this giant dog playing with this little tiny, just flinging it. So I asked the vet next time, he's like, did she play with stuff No, she never played with anything. Okay, because she's crazy.
Have you always had animals?
For much of my life, yeah. We got our first family dog when I was probably, 6. She was a little apricot poodle named Brandy. She was pedigreed, Brandy Vanette Dalshar. A cute little thing. And we never told her she was a poodle, so she used to do stuff like jumping in the pool. She was a real dog.
Yeah.
And so we had Brandy, and then one of her puppies, she got out one day when she was eating bread. We didn't know with who, but it turned out there was another pedigreed poodle who lived a couple blocks away. And
Lucky.
So they had pedigreed offspring, Louie and Mischief, Brandy's Mischief. And they're both boys. And Louis was adopted by somebody else, but Missy came back to us. He lived with my aunt for a while, and they just needed a bigger dog. And so Missy was my dog. He was this little spark of a powder gray poodle, cute little thing.
It's interesting with like animals, the animals you have. We've also had, when I was born, my mom had a Siamese cat, Pussy. And then my mom and my dad divorced, and my mom, when I was like 4, she met another man, and we moved in together. And Pussy said, "Bye, I'm out of here." And then we got just a European tabby, Cece. And she had, throughout my childhood, she had 5 litters of kittens. So
wow.
5, 2, 3, and 5. And that first litter, there was, we sold off all of the kittens all of the time without issues. But it was great fun, as a kid to have kittens now and again, and they smell. I love the smell of kittens. They have this gorgeous smell that if you're lucky, behind the ears of cats where they have that soft spot, if you're really lucky, now and again they can smell like kitten back there. But Felix, my Felix, he was sold to somebody who had I don't know what you call those, vävtapet in Swedish. So it's like wallpaper with like yarn on it. So it's really perfect for climbing if you're a small little cat. So he was always sitting at the top of the wall, meowing, because now he couldn't get down. And of course, he was, ripping up the wallpaper for these people. So, I don't know. They had him a week or something and just said, no, you're going to have to take him back. This just doesn't work. And my granny had him for a couple of weeks because she didn't have that type of wallpaper. And then we got him back. And he was just the most amazing cat to have as a kid, You could pick him up and put him down anywhere and he would just say, oh, okay, this is a good place to be. So he was a lovely cat, very special, very, big personality. And I've had cats most of my life. Not a couple of times I've been without, but I got a kitten when I moved away from home. And then after a while, we got Abyssinia. How do you say that in English?
Abyssinian?
Yeah, so we got an Abyssinian who was a year or two old. Gorgeous Bombadil. Because we had Bilbo, so then it was, of course, Bombadil. And we were at my mom's place. So we lived in an apartment, but they were happy with that. And then when we were at my mom's place, she lived in a house and they could be out walking and that would be fine. But in 94, well, somewhere around there, we'd gone up to my mom's place and my brother and his wife and their daughter was there too. Because they lived in Thailand, so they were there for, I don't know, a couple of weeks. And Bilbo, my tabby, he decided to say bye. So he disappeared. And I was so sad because he was my first real cat. He was mine. So we were, out walking, trying to find him and stuff. But Bombadil, he was abjectly sad. He was screaming for Bilbo. He would be meow. It was like, man, this cat is grieving so much that it's hard to sleep. He's like really for weeks on end. So after like 3 or 4 weeks, it was like, we need to get him a company, So we got a little red tabby that we called Pippin, of course, because then we had Bilbo and Bombadil and Pippin. And my brother and his wife flew back home to Thailand on a Friday or Saturday in the morning. And in the evening, my mom, it was summer, so she had the balcony door open. She was standing by the kitchen counter and she saw something in the back, to the side. So she turned around and was like, oh, wait. That was Bilbo lying on her kitchen table saying, hi, I'm back, licking himself. It's like, where have you? He'd been gone for 6 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, and he was, his paws, the
pads?
The pads on his paws were quite, calloused and rough. And he'd been out on a walkabout for sure. So we had to take him back. So then all of a sudden we had 3 cats.
Take 2, they're small.
It just went that way. But it's there's something special. But I am a cat person. But are you a dog person, or you're a both and person?
I'm actually primarily a cat person. I've had cats, so as a student, you're living in apartments. It's really, you almost can never get a dog in there. So we had cats when I was growing up too, a pair of Siamese. And then when I was 19, a friend of mine had a cat give birth to kittens in her home back in New York, and she brought one of the kittens back for me. And I heard this knock on my apartment door, and I opened it one day, and there's this little tiny bat-eared tortoise-shelled cat. She was so cute. Her name was Goblin. She had big yellow eyes, and she was a harlequin tortie, which means that she had no white on her, all black and orange, and so half of her was mostly orange and half was mostly black, and she was gorgeous. She was so smart, and I had her for almost 20 years. So that pretty much cemented the deal for me being a cat person.
Cat person. Yeah.
I have never been without a cat since, usually two. So I have two now. My two black boys, the Felix you saw, and my older cat, Elijah. Yeah, I'm very much a cat person. But when I got a yard with a house with a yard, I also like having a dog around, and again, you put the word out, and I got hooked up with a vet tech who had taken in a stray near her house, and she was a husky shepherd mix that I named Jessie. Amazing dog. She was so loyal that when I left for work in the morning, the neighbor at the corner could hear her yowling.
Oh, sad.
Yeah. She was funny. Oh, what a sense of humor. This dog, she was loyal enough that I could let her run without a leash, and she would never wander off. So I was out one day talking to a neighbor several houses down, and we live on hills here in West Virginia, so the front yard was sloped kind of downward, and I was standing with the slope behind me, and I'm talking to the neighbor, talking, and all of a sudden I feel two paws on the backs of my knees. So she pushes my knees in, and I'm going like this, trying to keep my balance. And I look, and the dog is running away, looking over her shoulder like,
I got you.
It was hilarious because she knows she's being funny.
Yeah. Humor it's a fun trait that you can find in so many other than humans, right? I like that. Yeah. I have Pop the cat now, and we've had him since New Year's 2015-16. He's originally actually the cat of my first husband. But he went missing too. A fall break. Well, yeah, somewhere around there. And that had me quite devastated because it's like we've had some fun cats. Felix the cat, one of them, he was a very, very special cat. But Pop the cat he is the one with the most distinct personality that is the most fun. So he's really grabbed my heart through and through. So he went missing, it's like he's gone for a day or two. It's like, but it was 3 and then it was 4 and I was putting up posters and I was telling everybody and, it's like devastated, fearing, because he's one of those cats. He does not understand that he's a cat and that cars can kind of dangerous for cats. So you can see him sitting out in the street, licking himself, washing himself. Car comes and he just goes, well, I'm busy here. He's like crazy cat. So we were away, me and the kids. A friend's son got baptized. We got a ride home. So in the afternoon, a week after he gone, we came home. We opened the doors of this car, and we're saying bye to the people who drove us there, and heard meow, meow, and we all 3 of us just went, "That's Pop." So we started running down the street to the end of the street, just 2 houses down. There he comes. And we were like in heaven, it's like, there he is, he's alive, he's, here he is. Turns out those neighbors had been away for the break, and he'd been in their garage, of course, as cats do. So they had just gotten home and opened the garage, and there he wanders out. And they were feeling so bad. It's like, oh no, what have we? And I was like, this is the best gift you could ever give me. You've given me my cat back. So that made me realize how I really, really, really want him to hang around for more. He's 8 years now. Born in 2013, so he's 8 years now. And it's like, oh, I want him for another 8 at least. And he's lovely because he goes for walks with me. And not just kind of around the block or in the garden, but for walks like a kilometer or 2 or 3.
Yeah, Fee would do the same thing, but
yeah,
I try not, because it's so rural here. There's no safe place for a cat to walk on the road.
Here is I live just next to a recreational area, so I go on walks there and he comes along with me. But he also, he can tag along with anybody. So we have one more famous cat in the neighborhood, but he's kind of the second most famous cat, where people go, oh, that's Pop the cat, You're going to come walking with us to the school today? And he'll just tag along.
Wow.
So they're special. They are very, very special, and they do sort of inhabit your heart.
Oh, yeah, very much.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I had somebody say that I don't want another cat because I get so sad when they die. And I'm going, but you can't, it's like, no, I don't buy that. You can't live like that. It's like, then you can't do anything or have any relationships with people that really mean something to you, or animals that really mean something to you, for fear of what will happen when you lose them or if you lose them. It's like, no.
Yeah. It is hard, you grieve when you lose a pet. And on the other hand, by the nature of being human, when you form an attachment, some part of you has to know that it will likely be impermanent. Or what's worse is that the attachment is permanent. but the being is not. So I find it really interesting among my pets. The dog's not as much, but the cats seem to pick up some of the habits of their predecessors, and they're not things that are that every cat does. So Felix has a cup of water on my nightstand that he drinks out of. The only other one of my cats that ever did that was Callie, the cat who passed away just before he came. And she used to come up and cuddle with me for just a few minutes every night. He does the same thing. So it's like almost like there's a lineage of that connection.
Passing on the torch, yeah. And I mean, if, it's like grief is like, a testament to the love and the joy, right? If you haven't loved, well, you won't grieve. If you haven't had fun with them, it's like you won't miss, so it's like grief is you should grieve, it's like, because that just means that you've loved somebody. Otherwise you wouldn't.
Yeah. There's a radio program and a series of essays called This I Believe. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I've occasionally thought about is writing an essay for that. That starts out, grief is a gift. Mm. And you learned it some with the passing of a pet. I really learned it with the passing of my father, and I was very, very close to him. And that loss rippled through my life, but only because my dad's presence was everywhere in my life. And you're right, you don't get one without the other. So it is absolutely true that this very special relationship is going to be something that cannot be replaced. In the dog's heaving on me. Twin. I can still feel the echo of my father's presence in my life. I understand things sometimes through the lens of being his daughter. That I can still see that I used to go up and visit them in Gaylord every year, him and my stepmom, and I can still see that kitchen. We spent hours and hours in that kitchen because he loved to cook, so that's where I got my love of it. Just all that creativity and inventiveness, and he packed his food with love. That's just so that relationship in some ways is still there, although now that one, the other end is open.
I was reading I was rereading The Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. That's this 1,000-page
massive.
book. Oh, I love 1,000-page books. So it's a 1,000-page book about the building of a cathedral in England, 1100, and starts 1100 and I don't know 15 or 20 or something like that, and goes for quite some time. But the book starts with one cathedral builder or a master builder and his wife, and they've been married for 15 years or something, and then his wife dies, and he gives the man kind of a recognizable character in a sense, or experience, because him and his wife have been so close, they've been for so long, so he continues to talk with her, he continues to get her advice, and because he knew her so well that he can kind of continue the conversation, so he would seek her advice, and it's like, I think that's cool. It's like there's something, I don't know, precious about that, about this thing that, it's like you're still there. You're not there in the same way that you were there, but you're still there. I can continue. It's just, the relationship necessarily takes a shift. But if you know somebody well, or if you've really, really, had that type of connection, it's a shift, it's an energy shift. It's not gone. Because like you say, that attachment is there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, definitely still there. You have to be willing to experience the loss part to get back to that connection. At least I was. I don't know if there are people who go through that without that. In my connection with my dad, I wasn't actually in the room when he passed. I was there, but I knew.
Yeah.
I knew.
How could you? How did you know? How?
It was. He passed away at home, so I had helped to tend him all night. He was under hospice care, and I went upstairs. Because I'd been up all night, I went upstairs to take a shower, and there was something in the middle, just of, like washing my hair or something. It's like, it went through me. It's like, he's released. And there have been a few times in my life when I get that sense of surety about something. And it wasn't a few minutes later when somebody knocked on the bathroom door and said he's gone. It was my stepbrother. Yeah. But I knew. So it's things like that suggest to me that there are energies we can sense in ways we are not fully conscious of, most of us, and that there are parts of our consciousness we don't yet know how to access.
Most definitely. I think there's a lot to that, and it's like I had when I was separating from my last husband, a couple of months after, everything was kind of up in the air. And it was a Friday evening, and I was home alone, and I had put on some gorgeous classical music that was just, so sad, so sad, just the perfect thing to cry to. So I was lying on the sofa crying, that the desperate tears, just this outpouring of grief. When the phone rang, and it was my friend Dominic, and he said, "How are you?" And I was crying. I'm horrible. It's like, I can't, And he said, yeah, because he'd actually gone to bed early, fallen asleep, woken up, just knowing he had to call me.
Wow.
So he called me, and we had a conversation for an hour or two, and it was just lovely. But just that, like, the connection there, he just said there was something along that node between him and me that was just, saying, hey, call her. And he did. So he's quite skilled at picking up on those things. But it was, it's like modern day, I'm not a big talker on the phone. Nowadays, people text or email or, so it's not as if the phone rings every day. So just the fact that the phone rang in that very moment was like, that's odd, because normally the phone doesn't ring, especially not at 9:30 at night. So it's I kind of play around with that, the feeling people, and try to see what I can feel and how I can feel. Yeah, I think that's also, in a sense, a little bit what I like about conversations. That there's something happening. It's like there's threads forming, more and more. And I can feel that a little bit with our creative community. Like, a lot of you are in the US.
Mm-hmm.
So it's as if my connection to you guys over there feels like, it's not a flimsy thread. It's like one of those under the ocean bed cables, big fat cable of wires that's going there. It's like it's strong. Which, it's like, it kind of makes my life richer.
Yeah, I would definitely say my life has been very much enriched by the connections I've made in the creative community. And it's almost a little bit like foreign travel because everyone is very generous and open about how they think, how they see things, how they present things. And even other people living in the US, they do that differently than I do. So we're all our own little nation. And that's amplified with people living elsewhere. And so there's two sets of additional difference, two twists of the ball that adds more to it. Because, somebody living in Spain or Scotland or Sweden sees things I don't.
Have you ever had an experience like this before? I mean, have you been in this, not necessarily this type of community, but a setting that gave you the same sense, the same connection?
The closest thing that I remember before is what's called a mastermind group that I had with other women academics. That I was in basically a series of webinars, a learning community, and we made a strong connection. I still know some of these women, and we would continue to meet by phone conference. We didn't even have Zoom back then. We would meet by phone about once a month and check in with each other, see who's doing what, how things are going. And these were people I had never met face to face. So it's a relatively close connection that happens by remote. There wasn't as much sharing. This was about a professional community, so there wasn't as the kind of sharing that goes on in the creative community, where a lot of us are writing in very granular detail about our day, about what we're thinking. The lists. I've now decided that that's an entire separate genre of literature called listics.
Yeah, most definitely. You should coin that phrase. And you'd better do it now, otherwise somebody else will beat you to it.
So, and then we can have the argument about whether it's poetry or prose.
Or both. And I don't know what the difference is. For me, I think poetry is the stuff that I don't understand. That's like my personal definition of those. Is like, if it's poetry, I just won't get it. If it's prose, yeah, there's a chance that I will. But there's probably a better one.
So sometimes poetry is in shape. Sometimes it's in rhyme. Poetry tends to have short lines instead of complete sentences. It is, there's some other lines rhyme, not particularly in my poetry. I once I got away from rhyming when I was about 12. I didn't really go back. And poetry is more impressionism than realism, although you can have surreal prose.
But so what is prose then? What is prose that isn't, is it fiction? Is it anything that's not poetry? Is it like, how do you define prose?
Complete sentences that have a narrative arc. it's usually work that is and I just had this conversation and I can't remember. There are actual definitions, like from the English majors. I wasn't one of those.
But so does a novel, a fictional novel, is that prose or could it be prose?
It is prose.
It is prose.
Yeah, novels are prose. And a lot of people would think that the dictionary is prose, but there's a comic named Stephen Wright who once said, I read the dictionary. I thought it was a poem about everything.
Actually, I think you might be right.
I just love that. His humor is like that. It's very flat and understated, but hilarious.
So your stories about what's the town?
Pinkerton.
That's prose.
Those are actually poetry. You've probably never seen them on the page.
Those are poetry. It reads like prose when you read it to me.
It is a story, but they're written as poetry. I can. So there's always the block at the top. So it's written almost like a travel book. There's a little explanation at the top, and then I have this image of the characters and their day or their place. And that imagery is part of poetry.
Man, I thought I had it there, but apparently I didn't. It's like I am soon to be, 49, and I still don't know the difference between poetry and prose. But it's good because that means there's more to learn, right?
There is work that skirts the edge. Ray Bradbury wrote prose. He wrote novels. He wrote short stories. But I find some of his work lyrical enough to be almost like poetry. A prose poem. So I know there are official definitions.
Definitions, yeah.
In some ways, it's only important if you're trying to make something is only one and not the other, which I don't worry too much about.
No. So is poetic prose then something that has that lyricism to it?
It is lyrical. It is emotional. It often hits a sweeter, more poignant note than just, hey, here's my grocery list, go get it. For some forms of poetry, there are certain rules, like a haiku has a certain verse structure, and it's supposed to be about a single image. So it's not a whole story. It's not a whole thing. It's like it's a cherry petal sitting on a stone in a river. And the viewer or reader pulls from that whatever they need in that moment.
So Shakespeare's sonnets are
Poetry.
That's why they're difficult for me.
they, let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love that alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. There's a certain rhythm to those lines. Sonnets do rhyme, they have rules for them. The very last part of that is, if this be error, and upon me proved, then I ne'er writ, nor no man ever loved. There's a certain smartassery to that, because he's saying, I've written this poem about love, and if it's not true, then none of the things I know to be true are true. So
okay, so Shakespeare, the smart ass. That might have been why he was popular. But I was thinking about that when you said that about him, how his plays are like speak to two different, both the commoners and the nobles or whatever. That's something that I've been thinking about when I've been, when my kids were younger, when we were watching like Pixar movies. That has a lot of that in it, where you can be watching one of their movies and the kids are laughing, and then the adults are laughing at something else that the kids don't get, and the adults usually don't find what the kids find as funny either, right? So it's like, that's a very skilled way of doing it, because it has me as a parent saying, oh yeah, I'd love to go to see the next Pixar movie, because I will also enjoy it, unlike some of the other like kid culture that it's like, no, it doesn't speak to me at 35 or 45 at all. And I've always been kind of impressed by that, because I think it's it's like, it's skilled to be able to layer stuff that way, that it can give like a multi-dimensional, multi-generational audience. There's something for everybody, and that's kind of tricky.
Yeah. That Anna Quindlen is a U.S. writer, did newspapers for a long time, and she has a book of essays. I don't remember what the title is, but she talks about how, as a young mother, she really appreciated Sesame Street because they had so many things in there that were really based in, that would be entertaining for adults. Like that there was some character that was a very, puffed up singer called Placido Flamingo.
Yeah, brilliant. Again, yes, precisely that, right? I like that. And when in Sweden, when my kids were small, there was a Swedish band for, doing music for kids that was called Doris och Knäckebröderna. So Doris and the Hard Bread Brothers. You can in some stores in the U.S. you can find Vasa hard bread. It's the Swedish hard bread.
Oh yeah.
That's knäckebröd.
Knäckebröd.
Yeah, and so knäckebröd, bröd is bread, but bröder is brothers. So when they say knäckebröderna, it means the hard bread brothers, kind of, But they were also really, really good. They had songs that I could listen to. It's like good songs, good tunes, good musicianship. So it's like I didn't go crazy from the kids playing the same song 500 times in an afternoon, right? Which is like, everybody who targets kids should have this. This should be a constraint. You're not allowed to do something if the parents can't stand it, right?
So the 4 millionth playing of Banana Phone doesn't make you absolutely insane.
Precisely, right? But I was impressed by that. It's like that. Yeah, I'm impressed by that. The ability to layer that way. It's cool. But maybe we should call it a day. And on the Knäckebröderna, I can post a link to one of my favorite songs by them.
That sounds cool.
I'll do that. Thank you, my friend.
Oh, this was wonderful. Thank you. That's just, I love having the opportunity to conversationally wander. It's a kind of travel along with the other kind of travel that we have been missing.
Yeah, it is. And that was, meandering conversations. I did a walk and talk yesterday with an acquaintance who works for a consultancy firm, and so we were having kind of basically a professional walk and talk, but not. It's like there's always relationship, right? And relationship building, connection being made. So she was asking me about, what I'm doing. And so yesterday, today is the 28th, right? So yesterday was the 27th of April when the first episode with you and me was released. So I was telling her about that, and she was like, well, so what's it about? And I was like, meandering conversation. It's not about anything. It is just what happens when two people sort of, meet up, start somewhere, and then you have no clue where they'll end up, right? It's like, that's what it is. And she was like, okay. Because it really is meandering. It is this thing. It can just kind of go and somewhere it will end up. So I'm grateful that you want to play with me.
I'm very grateful for the opportunity.